Support for Veterans Corner Radio is made possible by M&M Printing and the Observer News of Ruskin, Florida.
Hello and welcome to Veterans Corner Radio Podcasts, information for and about veterans. For this podcast, host Joe Mulberger talks with retired U.S. Navy Rear Admiral Thomas Lynch. In 1963, retired United States Navy Rear Admiral Thomas Lynch was a junior at our nation's Naval Academy and captain of the football team. In 1964, as a senior, he played on a team that included Junior Roger Staubach. We'll learn about the Admiral's life growing up in Ohio, his acceptance to Annapolis, and his career as a Naval Surface Warfare Officer. Here now is Joe Mulberger with Veterans Corner Radio on Veterans Corner Radio Podcasts.
Welcome to Veterans Corner Radio, a show dedicated to providing information to all those who have served our country's military and to their families. Now, here is your host, combat veteran and educator, retired United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Joe Mulberger.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's show. I'm your host, Joe Mulberger, and you're listening to Veterans Corner Radio. Today we have with us United States Navy retired Rear Admiral, that's two-star Admiral, Thomas Lynch. Sir, welcome to today's show.
Thank you very much, Joe. It's a pleasure to be with you and your fans.
Where are you from? When were you born?
I was born and raised in Lima, Ohio. Lima is in the northwest corner of Ohio, about 70 miles straight down from Toledo and 40 miles from the Indiana border, about 90 miles northwest of Columbus, 200 miles from Cleveland. Anything else you want to know? No, that's northwest corner of Ohio.
So is that a big town for Ohio?
Actually, it was a growing town at the time. We had about 40,000 people, and we thought it was pretty big. It's down to less than 20 now, I think. But at the time, we had Standard Oil of Ohio, Baldwin Lima, Hamilton, Central AMH, Rusty House, the Lima Locomotive. A lot of industry and just a growing, thriving community.
So did you play any sports growing up, or did you take an interest in any organizations like Scouts or anything like that?
I was a Cub Scout for a short while, and I dropped out of that. But I was played sports, football, basketball, and baseball year-round. And then football became my main sport. Although I loved basketball, but I was the guy that would what do you call the guy in hockey that goes in and beats everybody up? I was kind of that guy in basketball. You just got to rough things up a little bit. But so I was never a great basketball player, but I enjoyed playing it.
What year did you graduate from high school?
1960.
And where did you go once you were done with high school?
I graduated from high school. A month later, I was a plebe, a freshman at the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. And I was basically, we had 5 kids in the family, and my grandfather lived with us, and no one in my family had been to college. So my parents, for whatever reason, insisted and really pushed all 5 of us to make sure we get to college, and we all did. But I was the first to graduate. And of course, we had to get a scholarship. And scholarships were not, and loans were not as plentiful as they are today. So fortunately for me, I had a little football. I had some football notoriety my senior year, and Notre Dame brought me down for a weekend and gave me an academic scholarship. So for a while, I thought I was going to Notre Dame. And then the Big Ten rolled in, and I headed down to Northwestern or Purdue because Big Ten said that academic scholarship's a few $100. We're talking about full room, board, and tuition for 4 years. So I quickly became a Big Ten guy. And then my good fortune, we put on a science fair in my senior year in high school and first semester. And Jack Jennings, class of 47, Naval Academy, engineer, Wesley House, Lima, Ohio, was a judge. And afterwards, he asked me if I'd ever considered going to the Naval Academy. And I had considered when I was a sophomore in high school, Life magazine came to the home. And there's a vignette in there about Pete Dawkins in West Point. Pete Dawkins, an All-American football player, Rhodes Scholar, captain of the Corps of Cadets at West Point. And I remember telling my mother, I now know what I want to do. I'm going to go to West Point. And she told me, you can't. You have to know people. You have to have political connections. So, okay, fine. It's back to Notre Dame. I was a small parochial school that had the priest had me program in Notre Dame anyhow, so it's back to Notre Dame. And then in my senior year, I told Mr. Jennings, I said, oh, Mr. Jennings, you don't understand. You got to know people. And he said, look, you write a letter to Congressman William McCullough, 4th District of Ohio, telling him you want to go to the Naval Academy, and send your board scores to a good board score. Send your board scores to the Naval Academy, and I'll take care of the rest. I really didn't know what that meant, except about 2 weeks later, Coach Rick Porzano, assistant coach at Navy, was on the front door, and he became a lifelong friend. In fact, I spoke at his eulogy in Detroit a few years ago. He died at 91, and just a tremendous friend all my life. But my dad saw a quality education, no obligation to play football. If you didn't, I wanted to play any other sport I could have. I've not even been a sport, and there's no obligation there. And when you graduate, you have a guaranteed job. And back in those days, it was 4 years. And as we say, the guaranteed job in a leadership laboratory. And when you graduate, you have the opportunity to become a Marine officer or a naval officer. I chose naval. And then you could be an aviator or a submariner or a surface warfare, cruisers and destroyers. And I chose that. And I got aboard my first ship thinking that I'll give taxpayers back their 4 years for the education I had at the Naval Academy. And then I'll get back to Ohio and marry my high school sweetheart. But I did marry my high school sweetheart as soon as I graduated from the Naval Academy. And had her for 46 years before she passed. But she gave me 3 fantastic children and 10 fantastic grandchildren. And I've been blessed in that regard as well. But I got aboard in the noble purpose we have in the Navy, and it was the height of the Cold War. And I loved the wardroom. I loved the excitement of being at sea and the challenge. And so 32 years later, I retired from the Navy, but I had a wonderful career. I would recommend it to anybody anytime.
Well, I'm sorry to hear your wife has passed.
But thank you. I was fortunate. I remarried 2 years ago to a beautiful woman that we've been friends with. She was one of my wife's best friend, and I've known this lady for 33 years when we first met when I became superintendent at the Naval Academy. She and her husband, Senator Bill Brock, lived in Annapolis, and we became friends and traveled together. I knew her family and her kids. She knows my family and my children. So it's been a wonderful. I've been blessed throughout my life. I really have.
Congratulations.
Thank
How
you.
does one become a surface warfare officer? You graduate from Annapolis. You end up, is it schooling? Tell us how that works.
Well, first of all, many people do not understand, but at the Naval Academy, you have 4 years, 140 credit semester hours in 4 years. And then you got the military training and the leadership training and not only, and sports sports are a requirement at the Naval Academy as well. And when I was there, it was 5.5 days a week. We went to school on Saturdays for half a day. But he had a degree. My case, it was a Bachelor of Science degree. But it's the recognized degree, primarily technical subjects, electrical engineering, mechanical engineering. And then when you graduate, and during the summer months, you spend time with the active duty fleet and Marine Corps. And then when you graduate, depending on your class standing and the availability of billets, you have an opportunity to become an aviator. If you choose aviation, you down in Pensacola learn to become a pilot, and that's 2 years of training. And if you become a submariner, you do nuclear power training and prototype training, and that's about 18 months of training. And surface warfare, you go to school for about 6 months, and then go aboard ship as a junior officer. And next time you use the ship shorts, you spend a couple of years at sea, maybe 6 months or a year ashore. Then you're back and as a higher level department head aboard ship. Then later on, an executive officer. Then finally, you get screened for make commander and you get screened for command at sea, which is the ultimate for any naval officer.
It sounds like you went through all of that, and you graduated in what, 64?
64.
And then Vietnam was going on at that time. And then in your time, did you spend time in Vietnam?
I did not. I was on ships on the East Coast, and we deployed to the Middle East and Mediterranean primarily in the Middle East. So we had for Navy lieutenants and surface warfare, we had the small boats over there. And a lot of guys volunteered for that. I did not I had nothing against the war, but I didn't volunteer for that. And so I was on board ships on the East Coast and wound up getting away from, making deployments, at least not in Vietnam.
In your development along the way, you talked about the different positions. What were some of those positions that stand out to you as you were making your way up through the ranks?
Well, the most significant, and it'll be in my life, life changing for me was mid-August of 1977. I took command of a ship down in Norfolk, a destroyer frigate, and had that ship for 36 months. We were away from our families for 30 of 36 months. There was a period of post-Vietnam malaise had set in. We had shipbuilding. We were at a trough. We didn't have the ships. The world is still 70% water, and you have a forward deployed military strategy. So we had to spend. We try to have a 6-month rotation, spend 6 months at sea, and then come home for a year before you have to deploy again. But back in those days, in fact, we had a carrier that spent 11 months at sea and never had a port visit. Came back for 3 months and back over for another year. So it was a very difficult time in the Navy. But I took that ship, and we had, I don't want to say it was a terrible ship, but it was a mediocre ship. When I took command, when you have any command in the Navy, you're accountable for whatever happens. You're 300 men aboard the ship, and then have the ship at the pier side or at sea, and we're waiting for the conflict, the height of the Soviet War. So you always have these questions in your mind: Am I a good enough leader? Do I know enough about meteorology? Do I know enough about astrology? Do I know enough about ship handling? Do I know enough about our own weapon system? Much less knowing about the Soviet weapon systems and the safety of my men and all these things. And after a while, I said, well, wait, why am I the only guy thinking that way? Why don't you think that way? Why did the seamen think that way? Why did the chiefs think that way? The officers think that way? Every thought, word, and deed, what affects this with my ship? What affects it about my shipmate? And then I worry about myself. Every great leader I've known and I've seen and observed has to think that way, put themselves last in every thought, word, and deed. You're a married man, you have a family, you're the leader of that family. You have to think that way in your family. What affects it have on my spouse? What affects it on my family, my kids? Now I worry about myself. So we had drug problems at that time. We had race problems. I had a third of my crew eligible for food stamps. Navy was not getting any comparable pay. And I know all the time away from home. And our CNO testified that if you had to get all the submarines underway on Monday, he wouldn't be able to do that because we didn't have the personnel. So it was a very difficult time, but I guess I'm bragging in a way, but I don't mean to be bragging. I mean to say is that that's a philosophy of life that is instilled with me and has been significant for me. Those 3 years, I had from August of 77 to August of 80, I had that ship. We had a out-of-port home overhaul. And so with the deployments and the time at sea, we were away from our families for 30 and 36 months. But yet, we became the most improved ship in the Atlantic fleet of 350 ships. We made every commitment. And the most satisfying to me is we were awarded the Golden Anchor Award, which is the highest retained ship. Not only am I take you away from your family, not only am I pay you peanuts, and not only send you just another work day, you're going to ship over for another 4 years in the Navy. And because you believe in the cause, you believe it's a noble purpose, and you care about your fellow sailors and what's happening in the world. So I felt that was the most challenging, most rewarding, most satisfying years of my life, and always will be. Superintendent of the Naval Academy did a great job. I'd love to do that. That was a fantastic job. The command of the Eisenhower Battle Group, I had that for a couple of years, and we made a deployment to the Mediterranean. And then when Saddam went into Kuwait in 1 August 1990, I had a call at 5:30 in the morning, hit the battle group, whatever else you need to get through the Suez Canal, be in the Red Sea, be in position in the victory Rockies. They continue south from Kuwait to Saudi Arabia. We did that. We were there. That was an 8.5 month deployment, and we missed Desert Storm because they brought us back to refit and rearm to come back for the war. But by then the war was over. I had some fantastic moments in my life, and and that's why I'm so pleased that where I am today as chairman of New WSA. I could get back to that community. I've seen these guys. I've seen them bleed. I've seen them sweat. I've seen them give everything, every ounce of energy they have, and they do it for you and for me and for our country. And they don't ask anything in return. And so here at New Day, we have a chance to give them back that prosperity of owning their own home. And so it's a blessing for me.
So while you were on active duty, what was the most challenging decision you ever made?
Well, I had obviously when you're the top guy, there's always a lot of decisions you have to make. I mean, two that kind of stand out in my mind. Just off the top, and one, I had a chief petty officer that wasn't doing the job and just taking over the ship in August, mid-August. The first week in September, we were deploying to the Mediterranean for 6 months or longer. Turned out to be a 7.5 month deployment. And he was a personnel chief. He wasn't capable. He wasn't competent. And the personnel chief aboard a small ship, he's the guy that's got your service record. He manages all your training. He manages your lead. He manages your pay. It's critically important aboard a small ship. And this guy was incompetent. He just somehow he became a chief in the Navy. And he was 17.5 years in the Navy. So do I. Everybody else let him ride. Why not just let him ride, be a good guy, let him ride? But I said, wait a minute. I've got 300 guys on this ship. I have a responsibility to them. And so when you're at sea of command, I found out, and I was the junior commander at sea in the second fleet at the time. But I learned very quickly that I had some power being a commanding officer at sea, because I sent a message to the chief of naval personnel, a 3-star admiral, say, "Have you got this guy? It's incompetent, and here's all the things that I documented his incompetence. Good person, nice guy, incompetent in the profession, and I need a new personnel chief. I need them in here as soon as possible. I'm deploying in 2 weeks." Within 24 hours, I got a message back. Said, "Chief Umtischwat is going to be on board Monday morning," and the chief, the personnel chief that I raised the question about, had separation orders from the Navy. And 1800 midnight Friday, he's out of the Navy, separation. And I felt badly because he had 3 kids and he was a good person. And Friday afternoon, we just moored the ship, and I'm sitting in my office, and I got a call from the quarterdeck saying, "Chief, we'd like to say goodbye." And I thought, well, lay it on me, because I made that decision. And he came up and he said, "Captain, I just want to thank you. I knew I wasn't doing the job. I felt very badly about that. It's like a relief in my life. My brother-in-law had the job at Ford Motor in Tennessee. I'm moving down there to the job. It's like a new lease on life." And I just came up to say thank you. Oh, wow. So I always remember that. You do what's right. That we tell the people here. I remember watching Lisa holding Jay Sheen one time on TV. He said, right is right if nobody is right. Wrong is wrong if everybody is wrong. And so you do the right thing in the right way. The other was back to the same ship. A year and a half later, we were going through the Suez Canal, and that's about a 2.5-day transit. But you go from Port Said in the Mediterranean to Port Suez down in the Red Sea, and we had finished up the Ethiopian-Somalian war down there. We were down there for 2.5 months, and Ethiopian-Somalian war was one hell of a war that nobody in America knows about. But every 4 hours, we were reporting back to the NSA everything that was going on. And as we're coming through the Suez Canal, the last bit is the most narrowest part of the Suez Canal. We go into Port Said to go into the Mediterranean, so we could go through the Med, go through the Atlantic, and get home. I received a message saying Sadat has been assassinated. Sadat has been assassinated. In 1973, they had the Arab-Israeli war, and you see in Great Bitter Lake, Hawks had tankers rusting out there. You go into Port Said, there's bows sticking up out of the water, ship bows that are all rusted out. So I don't know if it's a coup. I don't know if it's another war. I don't know what's going on. But I called the XO. We set general quarters without a word on the ship because we had an Israeli, or excuse me, an Arab, an Egyptian pilot on board with a big walkie-talkie, and Egyptian light handlers and Egyptian lightning people that read the lights for night. And so I had about 20 or 30 Egyptians on board. And I told the XL, went everything out of the Army, set up the 50 caliber of a machine gun. I went to 5-inch 54 gun mount man from inside, all without a sound, and had the engineers standing by for full power. But we were not going to be POWs in Port Said, I can tell you that. So you get the knife in the teeth, and I'm sweating, but about 10 minutes later, everything's set. And then shortly after that, came up with false report. So that wasn't assassinated to the next year, but at that time, there's two decisions that I made that I always remember, with the personnel on the personnel side, and then on the preparation side. That we're ready. We're going down swinging. That's for sure.
So, what year did you retire, sir?
1995.
What have you been doing since?
Well, I went from the Pentagon, the director of the Navy staff in the Pentagon, and Tuesday night, the 31st of October, 1995, I left the Pentagon 9 o'clock at night, 5:30 the next morning. I had met a gentleman by the name of Pete Mustard, chairman, founder, and CEO of a company called Safeguard Scientifics, SFE, on the New York Stock Exchange, and it's a public venture capital company. I fell in love with him. I mean, just a fantastic human being. He also died at 91 several years ago. But he was like a father to me. I loved the man. Everybody who's ever known him feels that way. But anyhow, he had that company, and we met by happenstance. And he'd asked me to come up and talk to his people, and I did that. And then he asked me to join the company. And I said, and that was 2 weeks before I was getting out of the Navy, retiring from the Navy, and we wanted to stay in the D.C. area. But just to find my wife, I did that, went up there, and spent about 6 years. I jokingly say I couldn't spell venture capital. I just had to be there. From 95 to about 2001, where we brought about 10 companies public. In 98, we were the number one company in the New York Stock Exchange. Had opportunity to run a company down in Dallas. So it was a great experience. I made a few bucks, and then I would go do pro bono charitable the rest of my life. And then my wife started having her medical issues, and she died in 2010. I got a call from Rob Posner, who is the CEO of this company. He's a 56-year-old CEO, and probably one of the finest leaders I've been around, and what he's done with New Day USA. He went to a military prep school, but he never served in the military, but he certainly loves the military and what we do for the veteran military community is what it's all about. So I'm been blessed in that regard.
You said you had how many children and how many grandchildren?
I have three fantastic children who've never given me a moment of angst. And I've got 10 grandchildren that any one of whom you'd be happy to have in your family. They're just outstanding young people. And the youngest is 17 now, a sophomore basketball player at Gonzaga High School. I tell him, we say the best for last, Jack, you going to the Naval Academy. And then one's at Tel Aviv, the university over there, at Columbia, the program they have in Tel Aviv. And then the other 8 are all college graduates, all doing the 5 of them are in New York, and one in Texas, and one in London. And so they're all kind of all over the place, and one in California. So all of them bright, young, handsome, strong people, 5 boys, 5 girls. And I got a son that I adore, and a great son-in-law. And so I've been blessed, truly blessed.
Well, here on Veterans Corner Radio, we say our veterans are worth their value in gold. Sir, thank you for sharing your experiences, your life experiences, your time, and thank you for your service, and thank you for your continued service as you're taking care of veterans all around, well, the United States and the world. If you had something to say to your 16-year-old self, what would that be?
I would say, first of all, you're a lucky guy if you fulfill the ambitions that your parents have for you. I had 3 goals: go to college. I didn't know what that meant. be an engineer. They seem to make the most money and marry pretty little. That one I knew, and that one I did. And then just to have to give back to society, to do something for your country. And I never expected to live this long, be 83 years old, and to have the life that I had with my family and my wives. And so I've been blessed in your comment and to serve the country in uniform. I appreciate your comments, but I would say that I would consider it an honor and a privilege to serve. And I feel that way then. I feel that way today. And I always will. And thank you.
Thank you, sir.
You've been listening to Veterans Corner Radio with your host, retired United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Joe Mulberger. The views expressed on this program are those of Joe and his guests and are opinions based on the best available information. In matters of law or governmental regulation, it will always be best to check with the appropriate agency. Thanks for listening, and we hope you'll join us for the next program on Veterans Corner Radio.
Here's a quick final thought. If you're enjoying these podcasts, why not take a minute to subscribe or mark Veterans Corner Radio as a favorite? It's easy, and you'll be set to be among the first to find out when new podcasts are published. And thanks again for listening to Veterans Corner Radio.